of our pre-Pesach classes in order that we can be as prepared as possible for a very meaningful Yom Tov, God willing. Before we begin, just want to again thank our sponsors. Thank the Dimmesin family for sponsoring in honor of Shiloh's bar mitzvah. And we only share in Simcha's, God willing. Also sponsored by myself, Brooke, the Wogelanters, the board of directors, to thank all of the unsung heroes of our community, our Gabayim, our laners, daveners, COVID compliance team, who have the honor of having one of them on with us this evening, the security team, and the Errands by Adah crew, people making phone calls, baby meals. After a year of being separated like this, we have a community that keeps us going, and we should be very proud of that. And we should celebrate that. So we thank you very much. And it is a great schus for us to do our learning in your honor. Also sponsored by the Feifel family, David and Mary, honoring their new grandson, Avi Oz Shaked Littman, and may he grow Litorah, Lechuppah, Ule Maisim Tovim. Okay, let's talk about getting our homes and our kitchens ready for Pesach. So first, let's just talk about the home. I want to try and make your life as easy as possible. In fact, I guarantee you that if you follow the directive that we are going to go through this evening, Pesach cleaning can go for something that is an absolute nightmare, go from spring cleaning into something that is a really reasonable thing to do and something that will enhance, God willing, your Yom Tov, because you are not going to be pulling your hair out at the end of it. Here's the story. With regard to cleaning the rest of your house from chametz, which we know the Torah tells us that there is a prohibition not just of eating chametz on Pesach, but there's a prohibition of bal yira'eh or bal yematzeh, of seeing, owning chametz, possessing chametz, having ownership over chametz over Pesach. So therefore, we clean our homes and we search our homes in order to rid it of any chametz. That portion of cleaning your house for Pesach should take at most half a day of your time. It should be quite simple, because unless you take chametz into every single room of your house, into every single cabinet and every single drawer and every single everywhere, so then, then you know what? You might have a lot to clean. But most people in most of their homes do not take chametz. You don't take chametz into the nooks and crannies of your bathroom mirror installment in your in your bathrooms. It's just that chametz doesn't go there. You don't take chametz into your sock drawer. Chametz just doesn't go into your sock drawer. There is no need to wipe down. There is no need to sanitize and purge any potential chametz that may have ended up inside of your sock drawer. There's no reason to even go there. What you need is also, if you have places that you're not going to be opening over Pesach because they are chametz drawers, let's say, of chametz utensils that you're not planning on using, no need to clean it. You just take a roll of tape, you tape it up, put the word chametz on it. You go to the rest of your home. If there's no chance chametz went there, don't even bother. Just save yourself the headache in order so that you can enjoy the Seder, in order so that you can enjoy Yom Tov. That is cleaning the entire house. Now, with that said, of course, if there are places that chametz goes, so you need to make sure you do what you can in order to get rid of the chametz. For example, you have to make sure that if, especially people with small children, it's almost like all bets are off, right? Especially we have a very, very active Baruch Hashem Bli Ayin Hara, 1.5-year-old Asher, who just, we're probably going to be finding chametz in the strangest of places because he is just, that's his personality. He just takes his chametz and runs all over the house with it. So, okay, you know what? For us, we have to do a little bit more searching. But the average person, you check coat pockets, people maybe leave candies in there. Check places that you think that, chametz is going to be happened upon, but the average place, it's not going to happen in the house. And therefore, you don't need to go crazy. It's not time for spring cleaning. Spring cleaning, do another time. Do after Pesach. Do when you don't have a million other things on your head. Maybe, but not right before Pesach when you have so many other things that you need to do. What really is the time, what eats our time and what takes our time, and it's for good reasons that it takes our time, is preparing our kitchens for Pesach. And that takes, we said, a half a day for cleaning the rest of the house. Okay, it take a couple more hours, maybe not even that much, to clean the kitchen. The kitchen involves a bit more. So let's give a little bit of a premise with regard to the principles of how to kosher items, utensils, devices. Let's talk about the principles. And once we understand the principles, then all of the practical applications of that, all of the different examples of how do you kosher a Keurig machine, and how do you kosher kitchen towels, and how do you kosher a stovetop, a glass stovetop, and all of the different examples that come up, and people are, there are gadgets that are coming out. There are always going to be new things and new, but you know what? If you understand the principles, so then you'll be able to apply it to any of these things. So let's just first talk about the principles. Number one, the Gemara in Pesachim tells us on Daf Lamed that in a perfect world, in an ideal situation, you would have everything separate and new for Pesach. It's an ideal world. It's a perfect world. It's an ideal situation. I know people like that. I'm sure you know people like that, that have Pesach kitchens, and in their Pesach kitchens, they have all Pesach utensils, and they have all Pesach everything, a Pesach refrigerator, a Pesach stove, Pesach spoons, Pesach everything. The Gemara in Pesachim says, okay, in an ideal world, that would be great, that would be perfect. However, we don't necessarily all have that luxury, myself included. We do not have that luxury, and therefore, we need to understand the principles of Kashering. What is the source for Koshering, for making kosher? Tam Isser, flavor, food, utensils that became, that contracted, that absorbed, were saturated by prohibited food stuff, prohibited flavor. So this comes from the story that exists in the Torah in Parshas at the end of Sefer Bamidbar, when we learn of the story of the battle with the Midianites. That after Bnei Yisrael battled the Midianites as they're on their way to the land of Israel. So at the end of the story, so we won, and now we have all of the spoils, we have all of the booty, all of the collected goods from the Midianites, and we are actually commanded by God to go and collect the spoils from the Midianites. And among the spoils of the Midianites are all of their kitchen items, or all of their utensils. So we collect those utensils. But Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us that when we collect their utensils, we can't just start using them right away, because they were used for non-kosher food. We are Jewish people. Jewish people keep kosher, and therefore we need to make sure that the utensils are kosher as well. So what do we do? So Moshe Rabbeinu told us the halacha is kol davar asher yavo ba'esh ta'aviru ba'esh, that any utensils that were used with dry heat when they were cooking or they were being used with the food, and that food or the utensil what came in contact with the food through the medium of dry heat, so then ta'aviru ba'esh, the way you kosher it is with dry heat. V'chol davar asher lo ta'aviru ba'esh, and anything that did not come in contact with the food, did not contract the prohibited flavor through the medium of heat, of dry heat, but rather through the medium of, let's say, water, right? Through, it was stirred with, a spoon was stirred in boiling soup, let's say, right? So through the medium of water, it contracted, it absorbed, it saturated the prohibited food stuff. So then ta'aviru b'mayim, you have to immerse it in water. And Rashi teaches us from here that this is the major concept, the major principle with regard to Koshering. Koshering can be summed up, says Rashi, in one phrase of kibolo kach polto, that however the food was absorbed, that is the way that it is purged. So however the food was absorbed, that's how it's purged. Therefore, let's say, for example, you have a pair of tongs that you use for barbecuing. Now, that pair of tongs you use for barbecuing, when you go and you flip the chicken on the barbecue, you go and you flip the steak on the barbecue with the tongs, the flavor from the whatever what you were cooking entered into the tongs through the medium of dry heat because it was used over a barbecue. Now I want to be able to kosher those tongs for Pesach. Therefore, the way I would have to kosher those tongs would be through the medium of dry heat. I'd have to blowtorch the tongs because that is the way that it absorbed the chametz flavor. The way it absorbed the chametz flavor, by the way, chametz is treif, and that's why we have to kosher all these things. So the way that it was absorbed was through the medium of dry heat. Therefore, I'd have to kosher it through dry heat. Kibolo kach poto. However, let's say a soup spoon, that the only time that this spoon is used is not through the medium of dry heat, but rather through moisturized heat, namely through hot soup. And when I was eating the soup, I was eating my mushroom barley soup. So then the spoon absorbed the flavor of chametz. Now I want to kosher that spoon for Pesach. So the way I kosher the spoon for Pesach is by immersing it in boiling water. And we're going to talk about, of course, all the details of how you do that, how long you have to wait, all of the details, etc. But this is just principle number one. Kibolo, kachpoto, however the food stuff that's prohibited was absorbed, that is the way that you have to purge it. Okay, continuing. Principle number two. Principle number two is tam ke'ikr. That when we in halach, and this comes from the Gemara in Avodah Zarah, that when we look at food stuff, we don't just look at the physical thing that you see with the naked eye. Well, let's say, for example, we don't just look at the bread when we are defining chametz, but we even look at the flavor that the bread gives over. That flavor of the bread can be absorbed into it can be absorbed into the vessel that the bread was cooked in. Or let's say the soup. Let's use the mushroom barley soup, for example, again. When I take a spoon out of my drawer and I look at the spoon, is there any mushroom barley soup on it? I don't see any mushroom barley soup. So then why is it that I have to kosher it? Because we don't just look at the food item itself, but we even look at the flavor that came from that food. The flavor that came from that food was absorbed into the spoon, and now that flavor is inside of the spoon, therefore it needs to be kosher because tam ke'ikr. So then how does one kosher the spoon? So now I have the spoon, it absorbed the flavor from the chametz. Now I want to be able to use that spoon for Pesach. So says the Gemara the following, that from a biblical level, there is different type of flavor, that not all flavor is created equal. There is new flavor. Let's say right after I use the soup spoon, I just used it for mushroom barley soup. Now that spoon has absorbed chametz flavor into it. Now I want to be able to use that spoon for my Pesach food. That's a problem. That's a big problem. Why? Because that's fresh flavor inside. However, once you wait a 24-hour cycle, all of the flavor that was absorbed into the spoon is considered pagam. It's no seintan lefgam. Pagam is like stale. The flavor became stale at that point. It's been 24 hours. It lost all of its potency at that point. And therefore, on a biblical level, there would be no prohibition. So if that's the case, why do I need two sets of dishes? Why do I need fleshik ware? Why do I need milchik ware? Why do I need meat and dairy? Different dishes. Why? If either way, after the 24-hour mark, the vessel lost its flavor, all the flavor became stale, so then I don't need two sets of dishes. So we know that that's not the case. But why is that not the case? We know that we need to have two different sets of dishes. But why? Why can't it be that on Monday night, I have macaroni and cheese night, and then 24 hours later, when we get to Tuesday night, so that pot that the macaroni and cheese was cooked in has lost its flavor now, assuming that it was cleaned out. Now I could use the same pot for steak night. So I have steak night on Tuesday night, and then I go back and forth. I keep flipping back and forth between meat and dairy and meat. Why can't I do that? So the Gemara says that Eino ben yomo, ato ben yomo, that people are going to mix it up. You're going to mix up what was the last thing that this pot was used for? When was the last time it was used? I forget. Now, people are going to make mistakes. We're human. Human make mistakes. Happens all the time. I make mistakes all the time. It happens. And therefore, in order so that mistakes don't occur, we made, and our rabbis in their great wisdom made an enactment that you can't just use one set of dishes. You have to have meat and you have to have dairy. So good. Let's now talk about the spoon again. Okay, let's get back to our spoon. I understand that I can't just use that spoon for my chametz. Why? Because I used it for chametz. I can't just use it for Pesach now, even though it's been 24 hours. Why? Because of Eno ben Yamo Atim Yamo, there's a rabbinic prohibition against the flavor that is inside of that spoon. Okay. It's been more than 24 hours since it's been used. Doesn't matter. There's still a rabbinic prohibition against it. If that's the case, so then when I go to kosher that spoon, which we said before, kibolo kachpoto, the way I kosher it, it's now been 24 hours. I take that spoon and I can immerse it in water. I immerse it in boiling water, and then all of the flavor that was in that spoon will have been purged. It would have been extracted by the boiling water. But isn't that then going to cause a problem to the pot? Again, let's talk about the process. I take a Pesach pot. I fill it with water. I turn on the heat, and it's boiling water now. Now I want to take my chametz spoon that is clean and has not been used for 24 hours. So it only has rabbinic prohibition against it. Now I can take it, I put it into the pot. All of the flavor from the spoon was extracted. So the spoon might be good, but now isn't the pot an issue? Because now all the flavor, all that rabbinically prohibited flavor was extracted from the spoon and now is going to go into the water, mix in the water, and now go to the rest of the pot. So there's two answers to this dilemma. Number one comes from the Rush. Rabbeinu Asher ben Yechiel was a 14th century Rishon, or late 13th century, early 14th century Rishon, who was first in Frankfurt and Mainz, and then in 1301 moved to Spain, to Toledo, Spain. He befriended the Rashba, Sephardic Rishon, Spanish Rishon. He befriended the Rashba, and he lived the last 25 years of his life, from 1301 to 1327, in the land of Sfarad. So it's a fascinating character that we have in our Jewish history, that he was both a Rishon that was influenced in the Ashkenazi world, was very influential in the Ashkenazi world, and in the Sephardic world. So the Rush says that this whole prohibition of Eno ben Yamo, Ata ben Yamo, that this rabbinic enactment that you cannot get any benefit, you can't eat, you can't have that stale flavor, that is not going to apply to Koshering. The rabbis never made that enactment when it comes to the vessel that you're using to Koshering. And the second reason, says the Pri Megadim, maybe even a more compelling reason, the Pri Megadim says that when that flavor is extracted into the water from the spoon, because of the fact that it's boiling water, it destroys the flavor. Once that flavor is weak, once that stale flavor goes into the water, it's so weak at that point that it just gets destroyed. And it's never going to get absorbed into the rest of the pot. Okay, now we have our principles of koshering. Again, our principles of koshering are that, number one, kibolo kachpoto, however it was used, that's the way that the flavor would have to be purged. And number two, you have to wait 24 hours if you want to be able to kosher your vessel. Now let's talk about the specifics. Now, I basically just looked around my kitchen and looked around, okay, how am I going to kosher my kitchen? And I looked around at all the different appliances and different things that I have in my kitchen that I plan on koshering, and basically compiled a list. This may not be an exhaustive list, and I apologize if it's not an exhaustive list. If it is not, just if I miss a device, a utensil, some sort of kitchen equipment, appliance that you have in your home that is not on my list, just throw it into the chat, and Bli Neder, God willing, I will address that as well at the end of the list. Okay, let's just start going through it. kitchen items A through Z. Number one, countertops. Let's talk about our countertops. So applying our principles of kibolo kachpoto, that however the food was absorbed into the countertop, that's the way it's going to have to come out. And using our principle of that, you have to be able to extract the pagam flavor. Okay, so now, and that therefore you're gonna have to wait 24 hours for it to become stale flavor in the countertops. So let's talk. Number one, let's talk about ceramic or tile countertops. So ceramic or tile is one of the materials that cannot be koshered. Earthenware cannot be koshered. And this actually comes from next week's parsha. Next week's parsha, Parsha Tzav, the Torah talks about different types of korbanos. Now, when you bring a sacrifice, when you bring an offering to the temple, there is an obligation to be able to eat that korban in a certain given time. And once a 24-hour period passes that the offering was not consumed or the flavor was still there in the vessel that it was cooked in, that flavor or that food becomes prohibited to eat after 24 hours. It's called nosar, leftovers. You are not allowed to have leftovers. And if you do have leftovers, be'esh tisrofo, you need to be able to burn up the leftovers. So let's say you bring an offering to the Beis HaMikdash and it was cooked inside of a metal pot. Okay, the korban was cooked in a metal tin, a metal pot. So if that's the case, so then you can kosher it, depending, using the principles we just described. However, it says in the Torah that if you cooked it in an earthenware vessel, so then there is no way to kosher it. Rashi explains because in earthenware, the flavor gets so deep into the material, no matter how many times you kosher it, it's just going to be like impossible to get out. So if that's the case, so then you cannot kosher earthenware. So if someone has ceramic or tile countertops that are earthenware, that would pose a problem. You wouldn't be able to kosher those countertops. You just cover it with a waterproof cover. Okay, so you would get from, you could order from Amazon, you get from a Home Depot even. You get these thick plastic tablecloths that you can roll over your counters, get the entire surface of the counter, tape it down, tape it over, and you would be good to go. What about plastic or formica countertops? So with regard to plastic, the question is, how do we treat plastic in halacha? Is plastic like metal utensils or metal material that can be koshered, or is plastic something that is like earthenware? This was a hot topic back in the 60s and 70s when more of these types of utensils were being created. Rav Moshe Feinstein thought that plastic utensils, plastic material is like earthenware and therefore cannot be koshered, said Rav Moshe. However, said Rabbi Eliezer Voldenberg, I believe he passed away in 74, was the posek for Shari Tzedek Hospital. An amazing Talmud Chacham, amazing posek, was one of the major, but he really only gained his fame after he passed away posthumously. But while he was alive, he was an unbelievable Talmud Chacham, wrote a huge halachic work called the Tzitz Eliezer. I think it's something like 17 volumes. Unbelievable. The Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Voldenberg and Rav Ovadia Yosef, Zecher Tzaddik v'Kadosh Levracha, Zchuso Yagen Aleinu. Rav Ovadia Yosef both felt that Rav Moshe was wrong on this matter, and that plastic is not like earthenware, but rather it is like metal, and it can be koshered. Majority of poskim assume, including Mori V'Rabi, Rav Shechter Shlita, that plastic can be koshered, and therefore one would be able to kosher their formica or plastic countertops. However, in deference to Rav Moshe, it probably would be better to cover it up. We have a formica countertop. I'm just saying what the Reich family is going to be doing. The Reich family covers our countertops for Pesach. In fact, I actually find it to be a lot easier to just cover the countertop as opposed to koshering it. And I'll explain why in a second, because koshering the countertop just is messy and Mistakes might happen, and so it's just easier to just cover things. And it also gives like an aura to the holiday, right? You walk into your home, you see covered countertops, it looks like Pesach, and it's part of the fun. We have fun with our kids doing it, but nevertheless, if a person does not want to cover their countertops, rather they want to be able to enjoy the material of their countertops, they have Formica or plastic countertops. So the way you do it is like this. You'd have to clean the countertop very, very well. Once it is clean, you leave it of all food stuff. You clean it well, you leave it for 24 hours. In that 24-hour period, you could put, paper down on it. You could put a cup of cold water on it, but you can't put certainly no hot food can go on that. You can't use the countertop at all for 24 hours. Like I said, you could put your bills on it, but you can't put food stuff on the countertop for 24 hours. Once it has been left for 24 hours, then you do Iroi Kli Rishon. Again, let's use our principle. Our principle is Kibolo Kach Poto. However food was absorbed into the countertop, that is the way it needs to be purged. How does food get absorbed in the countertop? I don't cook on a countertop. I don't even eat off of a countertop. What do I do from a countertop? From a countertop, I would be transferring something potentially. While I'm carrying a pot of soup, as I'm carrying the pot of soup to put it on the countertop, I miss my step a little bit spills off, hot soup lands on the countertop. That is called Iroi, something spilling onto the countertop. And therefore, if that's the way that the food is absorbed, then that's the way the food would need to be purged. The flavor would need to be purged. So therefore, after 24 hours, it's clean, left there for 24 hours, I boil up a pot of water and I do Iroi. I pour the boiling water across the countertop, getting every single spot on the countertop that one could get. The same would apply to granite, stainless steel, or quartz. You do the same thing. You leave it for 24 hours after it's very clean. You then boil up a pot of water and pour it onto the countertop, getting every single spot. Now, there is a stringency that is pointed out by the Mishnah Berurah that if one is skilled enough to be able to do this, then it would be recommended. But if one is not, then it would not be recommended. And I'll explain why in a second. This stringency is called Even Milubenet. Even Milubenet is the burning hot stone. The Mishnah Berurah, the editor-in-chief, was the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Saul Meir Kagan, who passed away in 1933. So he quotes from the Marshal, one of the Rishonim, Ashkenaz Rishonim, that points out that there are certain food items that in their solid state and they're very hot, they have an increased level of heat associated with them. For example, let's say a hot potato or a hot piece of chicken that fell onto your countertop. That hot, solid food item has a higher level of heat associated with it, and therefore, kibolo kachpoto, if it was absorbed from this higher state of heat, and therefore it would need to be purged by a hotter state of heat. So therefore, you take a hot stone, says the Marshal, and you'd have to cover your entire countertop. Now, I am not a big proponent of the Even Milubenet, this hot stone, for a few reasons. Number one, it's dangerous. It could potentially be very dangerous. First of all, it's a chumrah. It is a stringency. It is not necessary. It's nice, but not necessary. And for things that are not necessary, of course, if it's dangerous, then you should stay away from it. If you feel that it could potentially cause a danger, then don't do it. Number one, you may not even do it correctly in the first place. It's a pretty complicated thing to do. While you're pouring the water, you need to be running this hot stone across the countertop. It's an extremely complicated thing to do. And it's like I said before, it's really a chumrah anyway. So unless a person is really skilled at it, has done it in the past, then I'd say certainly you should go for it 100%. But if a person's not skilled in it, it could potentially be dangerous. Better to stay away from it. Let's move on to, I think we covered countertops. Now let's move on to the next thing in the Reich's kitchen, the dishwasher. So the dishwasher is not recommended to clean for Pesach for a few reasons. Number one, the dishwasher has a lot of nooks and crannies in it that are extremely difficult to clean well. Again, like we said before, in order for you to even start the koshering process, all food stuff, solid food stuff will need to be removed. Koshering only takes care of flavor. It doesn't take care of actual food stuff, right? For example, if I have a pot that I was making meatballs in, and some cheese fell into the pot. So I can't just say, oh, you know what? I'm going to leave this pot full of meatballs and cheese sitting there for 24 hours, and then I'm going to immerse this pot full of meatballs and cheese into a pot of boiling water, and then the whole thing's going to be kosher. No, it's not. You still have the meatballs and cheese sitting right there. When it comes to actual food stuff, koshering's not going to help. Koshering only helps when we're talking about the flavor that's absorbed in the walls of the utensil, not when it comes to actual food stuff. So with regard to a dishwasher, there's so many nooks and crannies in it. It's so hard to actually clean out well enough to be able to kosher it. That's number one. Number two, there are different types of materials that are inside of dishwashers. Some dishwashers actually have porcelain, ceramic, tile inside the dishwasher, and therefore, because of all those reasons, it is highly recommended not to kosher dishwashers for Pesach. If someone has a great need that they absolutely need to kosher a dishwasher, I guess I would say just speak to me privately, but from an objective standpoint, dishwashers are not recommended to kosher for Pesach. Moving on, electric mixers. Electric mixers, they're really the same idea as the dishwasher. It is too difficult to clean properly. I'd say that the attachments of the electric, let's say like an electric stand mixer that has different attachments to it, or a hand mixer that has, the attachments. So the attachments, those you could probably clean well enough that you can then do, you could do hagala on them of taking them after they're clean and they sat for 24 hours and immersing them in boiling water. If you have a kosher for Pesach stand mixer or hand mixer that you need these attachments for, but the actual mixer itself, the bowl has, again, it's too complicated to kosher properly, too difficult to clean, and therefore would not be recommended. But like I said, the attachments are probably okay. Once they've been cleaned very well and they sat for 24 hours, you can do hagala, immersing them in boiling water. By the way, while we're on the subject, God willing, Sunday morning, right after Shacharis, we will be having hagala here at the shul, that if anyone has utensils that need to be koshered for Pesach, you can bring them here after they sat for 24 hours, and I'd be happy to take care of that for you. Let's move on. Continuing. Fabrics, towels, aprons, tablecloths, and the like can most of the time be koshered for Pesach. Simply need to be, cleaned off, make sure there's no food stuff on it. If there's no food stuff on it, so then you wash it in a cycle, wash it in hot water, as long as there's no remaining food stuff. If after the first wash, you find that there is some food on the towel, so okay, you wash it again. And if it's really hard to get off, then you don't use it for Pesach. But if you're able to clean your towels and you put them in the wash, then go for it. Then you can use your towels, your aprons, etc. for Pesach. The refrigerator, freezer, pantry, shelves, all you do, clean them thoroughly and then line them with paper towel, plastic covering. Now, you don't need to actually cover every single square inch of the fridge shelf or the pantry shelf. Really, the reason why those, while the coverings would be there, the paper towel would be there, is really just to remind you that it's Pesach and it's clean for Pesach. It's really there as a hecker, as a visual aid to help you make sure that you keep it kosher for Pesach. But it is certainly not necessary, right? Once it's clean, then it's clean. So the minhag, though, is that you clean it and you line it with either paper or plastic. Tables, again, you just clean it off and then cover them. Cover your table with some sort of a plastic covering, a plastic tablecloth would work great. The same would apply for a height chair. A height chair, you just need to make sure you clean it very well. You clean the seat very well, especially kids. They stuff things in all different parts of the height chair. So you got to clean it very, very well. If you're able to clean it well and you cover the tray, or you get a new tray for Pesach, so then you are good to go. Hot water urn. Okay, I'm literally just going around the Reich family kitchen over here. Okay, hot water urn. The hot water urn, generally speaking, could probably be kosher for Pesach. I have one friend of mine, at least he did this when he was in yeshiva, but he used a hot water urn basically for everything. I didn't know how many things you can actually do with a hot water urn. I only knew that you could literally heat up hot water in a hot water urn. Apparently you could use a hot water urn for a lot more things than just heating up a hot water urn, like cooking hot dogs and mashed potatoes and so many different things with a hot water urn. It was quite impressive what he was able to do. If you use a hot water urn for those things, so maybe don't use a hot water urn for those things, but if you do, so then you probably are not able to kosher it for Pesach. But if you use your hot water urn, like most people, only for hot water, so then it could be kosher for Pesach. Number one, just make sure you clean it very, very well. You clean all the surfaces. You clean the spout. You let it. You fill it with hot water. You let it boil, and you just run it through the spout, for like 10 or 20 seconds, and that's how you would kosher. That's how you would kosher the inside of the spout, and then the outside of the spout, you'd have to turn the hot water urn over and just pour boiling water over the spout. Again, this is after it sat for 24 hours. Moving on. Keurigs and Espresso. So Keurigs and Espressos, let's first talk about Keurig. Keurig, you would just have to clean it thoroughly. Once you clean it thoroughly, you let it sit for 24 hours. So then you would run the machine through with just water, and then you'd be able to kosher your Keurig. Nespresso, the same thing, except Nespressos are a little bit more complicated to clean. The good thing is that Nespresso knows that they're a little bit more complicated to clean, the company, and therefore there is a descaling kit. So you have to just, when you do your cleaning process of the Nespresso, you have to do it with the descaling kit of Nespresso brand. Once you use the descaling kit, you've cleaned it very, very well. You let it sit for 24 hours. Then you would just run it through a cycle with just water, without a pod, without a coffee pod to go along with it. And then it's kosher for Pesach. Microwaves. Microwaves are pretty complicated for Ashkenazim. This is one of the few areas that Ashkenazim and Sephardim differ when it comes to koshering for Pesach, and that is glass. There's a machlokes, there's a dispute between the Mechaber, Rabbi Yosef Karo, 1488 to 1575, author of the Shulchan Aruch, the Beis Yosef, really the revolutionary mind behind halachic process and halachic thought of the last 500 years, versus his counterpart, Rabbi Moshe Isserles of Krakow, who the age difference between them was unfortunately basically by 50%. Rabbi Moshe Isserles only lived to the age of about 40. Rabbi Yosef Karo lived to the age of 87. They passed away just a couple of years from one another, but the two of them together revolutionized halachic decision-making. What Rabbi Yosef Karo did is that he wrote a code of Jewish law, and then Rabbi Moshe Isserles added on where the Ashkenaz custom differs. So this is one of those places. When it comes to koshering glass, Rabbi Yosef Karo feels that glass is like metal. Glass is like metal. It's a smooth surface. It does not. It's maybe even better than metal. It absorbs food in a minimal way. It absorbs flavor in a minimal way, and therefore it can be koshered very, very easily, like any other metal utensil. However, the Ramah feels that glass is like earthenware, and his logic is as follows. How do you make glass? You make glass with sand. So if that's the case, so then glass should be treated just like earthenware. So therefore, says the Ramah, that it is impossible to kosher glass. Okay, that poses issues when it comes to microwaves. Let's talk about what the Ashkenaz custom would be if you wanted to use your microwave for Pesach. Number one, the glass tray that's inside the microwave, you'd have to replace. Number two is that most microwaves have a glass window. The glass door of the microwave would need to be covered up with some sort of, I guess, like cardboard or something. You'd have to cover up the glass pane of the microwave. Once you clean it very, very well, you took care of all the glass, then you would put a kosher for Pesach bowl inside the microwave of water, and you turn on the microwave for enough time for the water to boil and steam up the whole microwave. Once you do that, you wipe it down clean and it'd be ready to go for Pesach. Not recommended to try and do it. As I said, for Ashkenazim, it'd be complicated, but if you can replace the glass tray and you can cover up the glass pane of the microwave, then you'd be able to go. Sephardim, what you would have to do for microwaves is basically all of that, except you don't have to worry about the glass, because the glass can be kosher for Sephardim, and therefore you wouldn't have to cover the microwave door. You would not have to replace the tray. You would have to just clean the microwave very, very, very well and leave it for 24 hours and put the bowl of boiling water. And after those 24 hours, you let the water boil over, steam up the microwave, wipe it down, and you'd be ready to go. The other thing with microwaves is that there are filters and different exhaust pipes in the microwave that are difficult to clean also, like the dishwasher issue we had before. So if you can go Pesach without the microwave, it's probably better. But if you really need the microwave, that would be the way to kosher it. Ovens. Now, there are different types of ovens. There have been a lot of advancements in ovens recently. So let's talk about ovens. Number one, if you have a self-cleaning oven, then you are golden, because self-cleaning ovens basically kosher themselves. All you have to do is clean the oven, well, remove all visible food, clean it, and then you just run the self-clean cycle. That is it. Self-clean cycle is so hot. It's called libun chamer. It's like you're taking a blowtorch to the whole microwave. It's a beautiful thing. Like if someone were to leave a wooden spoon inside of their oven before they started koshering, that wooden spoon by the end would be just a big pile of ash. It destroys everything that's in there, and therefore you would be good for Pesach. So once you remove all visible food, you clean it, then you could just turn on the self-clean mode of the oven, let it go through a cycle, and you are good. If it's not a self-clean oven, what you would do is you would have to clean the oven very, very, very well. You'd have to do what the self-clean does for you. Clean it extremely well. Use Easy Off to clean the oven, to give it a deep clean. Leave it for 24 hours so that all food stuff that's in there, all flavor that's in there is pigam. It became stale. And then you turn on the oven after that 24-hour mark for 1 hour. Then you would be good to go. You turn it to the highest temperature. About 550 degrees would be recommended in order to do what's called libun kal, in order so that your oven would be kosher. Let's talk about stovetops. Stovetops, glass stovetops, you clean very, very well, and then turn all the burners on high until it glows for 20 minutes. They have to all be on at the same time, and then you're good to go. The only thing is that any food that falls in between the burners on the other parts of the glass top over Pesach, you'd have to just take that food and throw it in the trash. You would not be able to eat that food. Grates, if you have a self-clean oven, then grates are an easy thing to kosher, because when you turn on the self-clean mode, you take the grates and you put that inside of the self-clean. It might affect the color of the grates a little bit, but it's certainly the best way to kosher it. Otherwise, you would put it inside of your oven when you are koshering, if it's not a self-clean either way, and then you would be good to go. Okay. And you also would have to turn on the flame for 20 minutes, just like our other stovetop. Okay. Pots and small utensils. You would do hagala, like I mentioned before. You would boil up a pot in a kosher Pesach pot of water. Once the utensils were clean and not used for 24 hours, you would place it in the boiling water and then put it in cold water. Sunday morning, we're going to be hosting hagala here at the shul at 9:30 in the morning. Sinks. Okay, sinks, there's different materials for sinks. There's some sinks that are stainless steel sinks. So you would have to remove the drain if possible, the strainer, the drain that's inside of the sink, remove it if possible. If not, you just have to clean it thoroughly and then do Eroy. You'd have to, once you leave it for 24 hours, you don't use the sink for 24 hours, you pour boiling water over the sink and over the spout. And if it's ceramic, so then, like we said before, ceramic can't be koshered, so you'd have to just clean it very well and then get sink inserts, which is actually what we do in my house because we have a ceramic sink. And like I mentioned before, the faucet, you'd have to pour boiling water after not using it for 24 hours over the faucet. Warming drawers are very difficult to kosher. If someone needs to kosher their warming drawer, it would basically have to be with a blowtorch, probably not recommended for Pesach. But if you need to speak to me privately, I'm happy to help you kosher your warming drawer. Water coolers, you just have to clean very, very well. Frying pans and baking pans, you would have to kosher with a blowtorch because that's dry heat that it's being used for, and therefore it would need to be purged with dry heat. You have to take a blowtorch to it after not using it for 24 hours. Teflon cannot be koshered. Last two items, barbecues. Barbecues are probably the hardest thing to kosher. It's so difficult to kosher a barbecue. Number one, you'd have to take a blowtorch to the entire thing. After cleaning it very, very, very well, it's almost impossible to do. And therefore, barbecues, I would recommend just getting a super cheap Pesach barbecue, brand new from Home Depot for something like, $100, $75, $100, one of these half disposable barbecues. Anyway, you get one of those brand new barbecues and then you invite me over for a steak. Hot plates, blechs would be as follows. The, plug-in hot plates that you use, there's, by the way, that's good, just good terminology to know that we call two very different things, blechs. We call the plug-in electric hot plates blechs, and we call flame covers blechs. Those are two very different things, and they actually require two different types of koshering. With regard to the metal sheet, you would take the metal sheet and you'd have to cover it once you clean it very well, you'd have to just cover it in tin foil. And when it comes to cover the whole thing in tin foil. When it comes to the hot plate, you'd also have to cover it in tin foil, but that would be after plugging it in and turning it on for 1 hour. That is how you kosher the utensils that I have on my list. But like I mentioned, there could be some other utensils that I missed. So if anyone has any other utensils or different items you find in your kitchen that were not discussed, please feel free to throw them into the chat or send me an email, give me a call, whatever it may be. Happy to help in any way that I can in order to make Pesach as enjoyable for everybody. Pesach is one of the most special moments of the year. It is the night of Emunah, the night of the Seder. We, God willing, when we take a bite of our matzah, when we eat our kosher for Pesach food, we're going to be enjoying the fact that we are not having chametz. We are remembering the fact that Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. It is one of the most special experiences, the night of the Seder. I'll just share a fun fact with you, by the way, that Parshas Tzav, which always is Shabbos Hagadol, next week's Parsha, taught us that principle, has in it, that is the original source of that principle that you can't kosher ceramics. You see, Rabbi Soloveitchik was always found of pointing out that on Shabbos Hagadol, Chazal had it set so to the last detail that the laws pertaining to koshering for Pesach are in the regular Torah reading that end up the Shabbos right before Pesach. Speaking of Shabbos Hagadol, by the way, on a year like this, where we spoke about last night, all of the intricate laws pertaining to when when Erev Pesach falls on Shabbos. So one of those laws, one of those customs is that being that is Shabbos HaGadol and Pesach is just a few hours away. So then the Shabbos HaGadol drasha does not have enough time for the information that's shared for it to sink in before Pesach. And therefore the Shabbos HaGadol drasha, the big drasha, is pushed to the week prior. This Shabbos, God willing, the week before Pesach, is going to be the Shabbos HaGadol drasha this Shabbos afternoon at 5:45 here at the shul. For anyone that is unable to make it in person live for the Shabbos HaGadol drasha, there will be a repeat of the Shabbos HaGadol drasha just after Shabbos, Motzei Shabbos at 8:30 at this channel in this Zoom room, God willing. Okay, we will stop here for now. I wish everyone a Chag Kosher V'Sameach, a kosher Chag, but also a Simcha Dik Chag. As the Rambam says, there is an immense mitzvah to have Simcha on Yom Tov. If anyone has any questions, I can hang on for a couple minutes.